Welcome to today's episode of Comic Books and You with HeyTeeEn. Today we are going to be looking at Icon and Rocket Season 1, Number 1, dating from 2021. Full title of this particular comic is She Ready? It is branded as Milestone Returns. It is a new comic from DC in 2021. So yes, it is 2 years old by now, but it is the start of that particular line of comics. So it is a good starting point for us to talk about it. What we're going to start with here is introducing some of the characters we're going to see. Luckily, or how it goes, there are two characters that are important in this Icon and Rocket comic. I'm pretty sure you guys already know or have an idea of what they are going to be. It's going to be Icon, the first character here. Our main character, I would say. He is an alien that crash landed on Earth in the pre-Civil War era South and was raised by slave parents. He has a variety of superpowers, most of which have not been introduced in this particular comic. We're not going to be moving ahead or talking about all of his abilities yet. We are only going to be talking about what we see in this comic. Same with Rocket, who was originally his sidekick. A little bit more complex character in a way. She is a young teenager who was in with a bad crowd, who meets up with Icon and decide to form a superhero team. Personally, I do think Icon is a good role model and a good main character for a story. An educated black man, fairly wealthy, fairly conservative, set in his ways as well. He doesn't want to use his powers all that much. From what we see in this comic, pretty interesting character overall. Rocket, on the other hand, I am not completely sold on. She is, from the start of the story, low-level criminal. She does have ideas of justice and such that you learn throughout the story, but I wouldn't say that makes her a very good role model or character. As we'll see in the further comics, we'll have to see if she evolves into something less reprehensible, let's say. This is part of learning about those characters in this new version of those two characters. First thing first, we are going to go through the story from this particular comic. I've tried to split it up in a few sections, give you a few sample panels from the comic. It'll give you an idea of what's going on. If you're only interested in that particular bit of the video, perfectly fine. I will try to separate the video in chapters so you guys can jump in and out of the various sections easily. Our story begins with a terrorist attack on a spaceship carrying a large number of cryostasis pods. We're not exactly explained what's going on, where the terrorist is coming from, why he wants to destroy the ship. But he comes out and sets up bombs to destroy the ship. One of the alien wakes up to catch the criminal in action. They have a quick battle. The terrorist escapes in an escape pod before detonating the bombs. The one alien who is awake manages to flee in another escape pod, being the only survivor of the destroyed ship. After a period of time drifting into space, we're not giving a specific time at that point, the escape pod gets close to Earth and crash lands in a sugarcane plantation in pre-Civil War Georgia in 1843, if I remember right. A couple of slaves, the husband dreaming of fleeing to the north and by following the North Star, which he points out the crashing ship as the North Star at that point, are the first one to the scene of the crash. They witness it from their little shack where they're residing at the time. What happens there is a bit special. As the wife touches the escape pod's mechanism starts working in overdrive and turns the alien into a little black baby boy. The comic explains that it's a defensive measure that's built into the ship because most sentient species do not eat their young. That's an interesting twist and an interesting explanation. I do like that little information that they bring as to how it works. Interesting species that it happens often enough that their ships blow up that they crash land on alien worlds that they need that kind of technology. But who are we to blame them or to judge them? After that scene, we are brought to current day Dakota City, which is a kind of grimy American city with apparently very high crime. It's not specific where it is in the country. Might be in Dakota, but would be a little bit weird as Dakota is not well known for a large black population, I would say. And we are introduced to a gang of thieves that are going to rob a mansion that they believe is uninhabited. There's three men, one who appears to be the boyfriend of the one girl that is in the car. They have a short discussion and they manipulate the girl, who later on will start knowing is Raquel, who will become Rocket, into infiltrating the place, opening it up for them to go and rob it. They look around the mansion, trying to find things to pick up, and they are caught by Augustus, who is the fully mature baby we saw earlier, who's apparently more or less immortal, probably due to his alien ancestry. He tells them to leave at that point and to not cause problem. One of the gangbanger panics and shoots Augustus for disrespecting him. This is probably one of my favorite panel in the comic, by the way. We'll talk about it again later. But Augustus just gets up after the shot with no major injury, and he tells them that they messed up and that attempted murder is far worse than robbery. He uses his powers at that point. It seems to be super strength, super speed, the average superhero powers, I would say, to capture the quatuor of criminals, crushes their gun, and basically passes judgment on them after having captured them, telling them to never not reveal a secret and to try to fix their lives. Raquel heads home, goes to bed directly, more or less ignoring her mother, but spends the night thinking about what just happened. The next day, she goes back to Augustus' mansion and pleads with him to become a superhero, to make changes to Dakota City, which is gangrened with crime at that point, apparently. Augustus refused, stating that if he got rid of some of the criminals, others would just take their place, but Raquel keeps trying to convince him. We are given a quick flashback, 3 panels at that point in Paris in 1921, where Augustus has a sort of a similar conversation with another woman that is unidentified. But at that point, Augustus decides to formally introduce himself as Augustus Freeman to Raquel Irving, accepting her invitation as saying that it's a good way to start over. Fairly straightforward story at this point. Very an introduction to those characters and their history. Now let us go and do what I wanted to do with these series and discuss the more specifics of the story, the art, what it goes around it, and such. There are multiple covers available for this particular number, as with most number 1 comics that are released these days. I think there are 4 different covers. I have access to 2 of them, which I'm going to show here, and you've seen them in the intro reel. We have the standard comic panel here, and a variant. I think this one is the modern, what they call the modern variant. I personally like the standard cover much better than the variant in this case. As we talk about comics and we look at different ones, we're going to see variants, we're going to see standards. And I might start digging up a few of those I don't have to try to include them in those presentations. But I really like the standard one. First, the text at the top is very interesting. You've got milestone returns, strong opener, icon and rocket. Gives you everything that you need to know. And you see the two main characters in an heroic pose rather than in an action pose or something like that. It gives you a good idea of who those characters are going to be. The variant cover that I do have, you have Rocket in a purely action pose and Icon looking down. Not sure I enjoy this particular cover. It's not bad in any ways, but it's missing something, to my opinion. What else is going on here? Well, the variant cover is printed on a better quality cardboard, more durable, better quality. I would like every single comics to come out with that particular quality of cover. While we bag and board our comics, a better quality cardboard for the covers would make them more durable. Never been a huge fan of the paper they use in most American comics. Um, Always find it a little bit too cheap. I would like to have a gloss or protective layer on it because when you touch your comic, you do feel the ink, you feel the colors on it. Sometimes you have bleeding as well. Doesn't seem to be the case on those comics specifically. They are decent quality. I mean, DC and Marvel probably have good quality inks to use and paper to use, but I would like to see 5, 10, 20 years from now what it would feel like. I do have a few older comics that I'm going to review or look at. It might give me more of an idea of what it goes. Color in the comic is pretty good overall, but I will say I feel it's overwhelming. They put a lot of dark colors. It's very hard in a way. I think it's an after effect of Batman being the comic at DC. They always try to make things dark, broody a little bit, and honestly, a lighter palette should be used most of the time for comics. We like to see things that are brightly lit or lit in a certain way so we have a better idea of what's going on, and it attracts the eye a lot more than dark and broody. It works for some things. Not sure it works for this. The ads. Yes, we're going to talk about ads. I was not sure originally if there was going to be different in the ads between the premium variant cover and the basic cover. It is the exact same thing. I wasn't sure. I wanted to check. We have a full ad for Stargirl at the front, at the back of the cover, and the back cover as a Legend of Tomorrow ad for it. Those are two CW shows that were running at the time. We have an ad for Titans on the back cover, which was on HBO Max. Funny note, all of those shows are canceled. We might have to have an actual discussion on this at some point, or we might want to talk to someone about this at some point. There's a 2-page ad for the Suicide Squad 2021 by James Gunn. It's nothing super special. It's basically a movie poster. We've got a few trade paperback ads there as well. But it nicely splits the flashback scenes at the start and the current day scenes at the end. So it actually is a nice break. Strangely enough, I find this ad is somewhat tasteful. At the end, we have 7 pages of ads for other DC product, mostly Batman or Batman related. The only one that's related to Milestone is an ad for Hardware Season 1. Artistic merit. We're going to go through a few things. The alien spaceship, I actually really like it personally. I have other people who looked at this comic and said they didn't really like it, but it's a bit busy, but it's functional. And it does, look like a spaceship. like I say here, I wouldn't watch a full show of ships like this. Probably would be an absolute pain for the designers and drawers to build things that complex. But for a one panel thing, it works. Alien design, it's nothing special. It's basically a gray, typical alien that we know of. I mean, if we were in the standard DC universe, that looks like a green alien, green Martian to me as well. So not super inspired. The alien terrorist, however, a bit different. I kind of like him. But as my son said, it's basically an evil bug llama. Is that a bad thing? I'm not sure. I mean, if we see more of those guys, maybe they'll be good. The Georgian 1843 section is functional. Nothing stands out. Nothing is special. The events happen at night, but it still feels like it's too dark. Be good to have color. It's actually missing here. We have some panels here that I'm showing as demo as usual. It's missing something. I like color. I read tons of manga, so that would sound weird. But when I'm reading a comic, I like color. I like seeing what's going on and have a good idea of what it is. The Dakota City part is functional. Once again, pretty much the same kind of thing. Nothing truly stands out. Nothing is completely awful. I would like to have more light. And I do love that panel of the gangbanger shooting at Augustus. It captures the terror of actually shooting at someone. Of course, that guy doesn't know that shooting at this man will not kill him. So it's a mix of, oh shoot, I have to kill someone, and I don't know what I'm actually doing. It's a very, very good little panel. The action panels with Augustus in them is pretty good. That's his introduction in the modern era here at the bottom. I'd say it's pretty decent. It's one of the pretty good panels, but it doesn't really stand out a lot. We have good muscle definition on the character, good proportions. He looks impressive. He looks like a guy that could kick your ass, even if he wasn't a superhero. The bit in the car, however, uh, far less interesting in terms of the art. It's boring. It's tired. We have no action in it. We'll talk about this maybe a little bit more later. This is our action scene. Literally, this is the action scene. One page where we have real action in that period. Is it good? It's a decent, again, panel, functional. Augustus looks fairly interesting as a character here in the two bits. Good proportion, good physique. He looks the part. He looks like he could terrify that group of criminal trying to break into his house. This is your superheroing moment in the comic. What I don't like is that it looks static. Here, I mean, I called that picture in my reel Dracogustus. It looks like Dracula trying to catch someone. And you have a little few movement lines in the background, but it doesn't look active. It doesn't look as interesting as it should. In the scene where he's flying, it's a flat piece. I'm not, like I'm saying here, I'm not looking for Kirby lines anywhere. I'm not looking for the exaggerated manga spreads of energy, spreads of line to show movement, but action should be depicted on there. Another thing that I think is a bit of a failure, uh, the criminals try to break out, try to leave. I would have had Augustus bust the door open rather than them trying to leave. I would have had the criminals rush out, Augustus busting out and grabbing them, dragging them back in. That would have been a better action scene for what it's worth. Now let's talk a little bit more about the story elements, where it stands, where it does. Here we have basically the Milestone 4 might be what I'm going to call them in the future, the four main characters in the Milestone universe. You've got Icon, you've got Rocket, you've got Static Shock, who is, I would say, the most well-known character of that universe, and Hardware. The comic is branded Milestone Returns. Milestone was originally created in 1993 by African American writers and artists to provide opportunities for minority characters and minority authors to work in the comic book industry. The brand has generated those four characters we just talked here, and like I said, Static Shock is your most popular character in the bunch. He had his own cartoon show. He was part of the Teen Titans for a while. You, I think you do see him in the background in Teen Titans Go as an example. So he is a recognizable figure in the group. Milestone was merged into the DC Universe proper in 2008, but since 2015, they've been trying to do a revival of the Milestone Universe. DC created Earth M for the Milestone characters to evolve on and to live on separate from everybody else. I'm not a huge fan of this, not only because it separates them from the DC Universe proper, which they could interact in fairly easily, but it does seriously feel like a separate but equal kind of situation. What DC should have done, in my opinion, in this case, is not create Earth M or anything like that. You just revive the character. You bring them in. You create their stories. When you have some comic book geeks trying to ask, well, what universe is it in? Is it Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, Earth 732? You just say, no, it's Milestone. It's its own thing. It works in manga. It works really well in manga. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't work in comic. Icon and Rocket is the foundation of Milestone Earth M, along with Hardware. Those two comics were the first to be released. Later on, you've got your Static Shock that I think is starting this year in 2023. And you've got Icon versus Hardware, which was released as well this year. For all intents and purposes, this is going to be separate from the core DC stories. So Superman shouldn't be showing up, Flash shouldn't be showing up, no Batman, no extended Bat family, and unfortunately, no Wildcats. Is it playing to the strengths of the genre? Well, let's start from the top. We've got a tragic backstory to introduce a character. This is a strong element of the genre, happens in comic, manga, French comic, everywhere. I mean, this is a way to bring the character, explain what is going on. But I mean, we're talking about an alien that crash lands on a planet. Where have I heard about that before? I'm not sure. I mean, is there another superhero that's an alien that crash lands on the planet that's got super strength, super speed, flying, eat vision? Weird, isn't it? You could say Icon is an XP Superman. Basically, he's Superman out of his universe. I wouldn't say it's a tokenized Superman because he's not wearing the S. He didn't crash land anywhere and was raised by a loving family in the Midwest. Or if you look at Red Sun in Russia or something like that. He is not Superman, but he is very Superman-like. Is that a bad thing? Not quite sure. But it's a trope I actually like. I understand where it comes from. Personally, maybe not one I would abuse, but we're going to see other stories with the similar kind of introduction of characters, probably in the near future if you stay with me on those videos. The rest of the comic, however, doesn't follow that strong start. Not sure you would like to read stories about the socio-economical struggle of African American in poor cities, or feelings in cars, feelings in all ways, as we often say. But that's not what a superhero comic is for. Superhero comics are for superheroes. We get 1 page of action after the introduction. And even in the introduction, I would say we get about a page and a half of that alien world in a spaceship. Basically, we have one use of superpower in the 13 pages past the intro. And even in the intro, the only real superpower we have is Mr. Bug Llama spitting acid. I know some people don't like stories starting in media res, but for a comic like this, or for comics in general, I think it is necessary. We should be seeing Icon and Rocket doing superhero stuff. It's their premiere issue. It's your introduction to those characters. You should be seeing those two fighting a supervillain, stopping a flood, doing something with their powers that'll keep you reading. Right now, all you really have is the introduction of the characters, how they're going to start interacting with each other. We're also faced with what I call the curse of realism. It looks real. The characters look real. Proportions are good. And Raquel looks like, okay, she looks like a 12-year-old boy, but okay, she does have some curves at least, so it saves her a little bit. But the characters, the locals, they're not engaging. We're not interested in them. We're going to be looking at all sorts of comics in this series, and this is one where I feel like the characters are not engaging. They don't have anything that attracts you to them directly. Another thing that is annoying, mostly because I'm an English major, but for other reasons as well, is the constant use of African American vernacular English. It does reflect how the people would talk in these areas. What it causes, however, is if kids or teenagers start reading this, well, what are they going to learn? Are they going to learn proper English, or are they going to earn this form of bastardized English, which shouldn't be promoted? I also find it that it's a huge failure that you only learn Raquel's name 17 pages in. You basically have to get to the end of the comic to hear her name. And you get her name and Augustus' name together only in the final panel of the comic. Editor choice, I would say, but not a great one there. Even worse, though, their superhero names are never mentioned. We know their Icon and Rocket because the cover tells us. We don't know who they are yet. Pacing. That's a bit that's always going to be difficult because it's hard to explain pacing, but let's go and try to get it done. The introductory bit, spaceship, pre-Civil War Georgia, perfectly paced. You get the intro, you get the characters, you get what's going on, perfectly understandable, and the action flows easily. When you get to the Dakota City bit, that's when it gets a lot harder. A lot of talking, very little action to break it up, and the talking is not always super interesting. My son, who I let read my comics and actually get his input on this, didn't like these bits. Too much talking. Complete scenes could be cut, and no major changes to the story would happen. Another bit that I don't like is the scene where Raquel goes back home is 3 panels long. We would have needed 1 or 2 more panels where you see her reflect as to what happened on that day, what she can do, what she did before. That would be more feelings, yes, but it would be an explanation as to what she's doing later. An editor should basically have taken a scalpel, chopped off bits of it, and told the artist and the author, restart this, redo it. That bit is where it's really difficult to work with. Um, Literally, I was speaking once again with my son. In this case, we're looking at the comic, and I said, well, Raquel breaks into the house. That should have been the start of that Dakota City bit. She should have broken into the house, let her friends in. Didn't even need to be 3 friends. Just her boyfriend would have been enough. Those are the other 2 are superfluous characters. You have him break in, you have him actually do the same kind of discussion they have in the car, but you have it done in the house as they're casing the place, trying to figure out what they want to steal, what they want to leave with. The rest would flow better. And the fact that you'd have only one other character beside Raquel would make it more personal. Now, with three random tugs, we're missing something. All right, let's talk about the really bad part, the message. It's a superhero team with two black superheroes. The message is going to be everywhere. It's going to be the core of this story. We have the feeling for that. You buy the comic, you should be expecting that in modern day. But I had that kind of feeling when I bought it. Well, this is built in woke. This is made to be about messaging and story. They can't mess it up, right? They can't add more woke to it, but they can. And that's where we have an issue. First big problem, Icon can't have his own series. This is Icon and Rocket. He can't be the main character. He cannot be the central figure in his own comic, even though he's a black man. He needs to have a female equal. Let's say she's still a sidekick, she's learning. Overall, she's going to be the driving force in the whole story. Without Raquel, Augustus would not have done anything. He would have stayed in his house, kept doing what he was doing. It's an old playbook. We're used to it by now. We've seen that kind of intersectionality everywhere. I can't wait to learn what Raquel's sexuality is. I can't wait to learn what background our friend Augustus have, and all those kinds of things. We expect it. That's getting to be a problem, and this was already built in. They didn't need to add anything extra to it. What makes it worse and worse is that it piles up on the things. Spaceship crashes. Husband and the wife in the little shack see it happen. The husband is not the one taking charge and saying, okay, we got to go see what's going on. The wife that tells him we have to go. Her husband is clearly depicted as being dimmer than she is. They have a short discussion, and she basically says that in more words. It's the same with the three unnamed gangbangers, don't even have their names, but they're all depicted as idiots. Not because they're criminals, not because they're black or anything, pretty much just because they're there and unfortunately men in a way. We have African American vernacular English being used. No occurrence of the N word. Not a bad thing, I would say. Makes the comic cleaner. I'm happy to be able to show it to my kids. But it is something that we should expect in that kind of neighborhood. When they refer to Raquel, or pseudo boyfriend, and I'm pretty sure he's not going to stay around or be relevant, he refers to her as a female. Pretty sure that's not what a gangbanger in inner city in the US would say. It'd be a word that starts with B when we're talking about her with his friends. Another part that kind of irked me was Martin Luther King being referred to as a superhero by Raquel. I know some people really like Dr. King. I am definitely not one of his biggest fans. While he did have a couple good speeches and a good idea, once you start digging into him, not the best human being in the world. In the same kind of period, you also had Malcolm X, which I do see as a very positive figure, even though he was a bit more activist and a bit more violent. He was still a better figure than Martin Luther King, in my opinion. We did have a few other opinions. Like I said, I did show that comic to my early teenage son. He's not that old, but he does love to read, and he likes reading comics, mainly manga, obviously. But he had some comments. It just looks like Superman, but a bit different. We never see their costume in the whole comic. It's weird. Keep making mistakes when they speak. It's weird. Thing is, I haven't groomed my kid to say those kinds of things. I let him read what he wants to read. I do talk with him, try to learn what he's doing. I do monitor what he watches and what he reads on the most part. But those are the same kind of feelings that I had reading this comic. So this is a universal thing. Showed it to my wife. She didn't read the whole comic, but she saw the cover and basically said it's basically a generic DC comic. Could replace the characters with stick figures, and it wouldn't make a difference. Is that true? Unfortunately, probably. I mean, there is the fact that they are in a poorer black neighborhood to start the story with, etc. But I mean, could you replace the two characters with white characters? Probably. I mean, replace them with Irish in the 1930s would be the exact same kind of thing. Replace them with Cajun in Louisiana, probably be close again. Poor Asian people in Japan, China, does make them universal characters, which is not a bad thing. But at this point, are they uniquely black characters? Not really. That's kind of a failure, in my opinion. My final thoughts on this. Clearly, I'm not the target audience for this comic, but I feel that it makes the comic fail even more. I should be able to immerse myself in those characters. I should be able to sit down, learn from their experience, learn from their backgrounds, learn from them. It should be interesting. It should lead me to not only want to read more, but understand them more and understand where they're coming from more. These comics target a percentage of 13% of Americans who read comics. So we're talking about a couple percent of the American population. Canadian blacks wouldn't be able to really identify with these characters either. Canadian blacks, as an example, I'm from Canada. A lot of them are Haitian immigrants or African immigrants. They don't have these experiences. Actual Africans reading these comics would find all the characters super entitled because they are super rich compared to what they have. European blacks, once again, they're African immigrants, most of them. They don't have the same experience as we see here. Those characters don't connect with the vast majority of the people on this planet, making it pretty difficult to get a profit out of it as well. We have barely any characterization to work with. Future numbers, future serials in this should make it more interesting, I hope. And we should be learning more about those characters. But we're looking at a 6 numbers miniseries, limited series. Will that be long enough for me to connect well with those characters if we're still talking about 22 pages per volumes? Hopefully. But I have to compare it to a manga because that's what I'm very used to. 6 chapters of 22 pages, that's half of a volume of a manga. About. It's very short. Will they be able to turn it around? We'll see when we get the other issues and we review them together. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for spending the time listening to me. And stay tuned. I'll try to bring you more comics, different things, mangas, French comics, anything I can get my hands on, and I can spend some time creating those presentations for you guys. Thank you.